The dress feels like a second skin, cool silk against my racing pulse. Laughter echoes down the hall, bright and oblivious, the sound a jarring contrast to the ice forming in my chest. My sister's wedding. A day I dreamed of for her, for us, for the family we built brick by careful brick. My fingers smooth over the fabric, the intricate beadwork suddenly feeling heavy, like armor I hadn't realized I needed until this exact moment. He walks in then. Not alone. The air catches in my throat, thin and sharp. My husband. And her. Isabella. The name tastes like ash. She's wearing a dress the color of expensive champagne, clinging to her in all the right places, designed to steal light. He's smiling, a wide, easy smile I haven't seen directed at me in months, maybe years. He guides her by the elbow, navigating the polite crowd as if this is perfectly normal, as if bringing his mistress to my sister's wedding is a natural extension of our life together. A wave of dizziness washes over me, the ornate carpet beneath my feet seeming to tilt. This isn't just a betrayal, it's an act of war, declared on sacred ground. My sister's day. My family's space. My dignity, shredded and scattered like confetti. The music swells, ironic and joyful, and I stand frozen, a statue carved from shock and a sudden, searing heat that threatens to consume me whole. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. It helps me more than you know. We had a life, or what I thought was a life. Weekends at the lake house, Sunday dinners with my family, the easy rhythm of two people sharing space, sharing dreams.
John.
He was my anchor, my partner. We built a business together, brick by brick, just like the family. A successful construction firm. He handled the clients, the deals, the public face. I managed the finances, the logistics, the contracts, the mountains of paperwork that kept the wheels turning smoothly.
It was a good life.
Comfortable, predictable, safe. I thought it was safe. I poured everything into it, into us. My energy, my time, my trust, my love. I wasn't flashy. I wasn't demanding. I was present, dedicated. The quiet engine that made everything run. I liked the predictability. I craved it. It felt like solid ground in a world that often felt chaotic. I found joy in the details, in the balance sheets that lined up, in the projects finished on time and under budget. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real. It was ours. Or so I believed. The cracks started small. Late nights at the office that stretched longer and longer. Phone calls taken in hushed tones, just out of earshot. A new cologne, sharper than his usual. A sudden, almost frantic interest in his appearance. I told myself it was stress, the demands of the business. I was busy too, always working, always optimizing. We were a team. Teams had demanding seasons. This was just a season. I was tired. I needed to rest. He needed space. Excuses. I piled them up like sandbags, trying to hold back a tide I didn't want to admit was rising. The first real jolt wasn't a smoking gun. It was a misplaced receipt. Tucked into his coat pocket, a small, insignificant rectangle of paper from a fancy restaurant downtown, one we hadn't been to in months, not since, well, not in a long time. Dated last Tuesday. He told me he was working late on the Miller bid. Miller bid. The words echoed, hollow and fake. The pit in my stomach opened up, cold and vast. It wasn't proof, not really. It was just a receipt. But the feeling that came with it, the feeling of being fundamentally, bone-deep lied to, that was proof enough for my gut, even if my head still desperately clung to the sandbags. I started watching. Not snooping, not at first. Just watching. The way he avoided my eyes. The way he flinched if I touched his phone. The carefully constructed casualness when I asked about his day. The late nights became every night. The hushed calls became shorter, cut off abruptly when I entered the room. He was a stranger, living in my house, sharing my bed, wearing my husband's face. The air in our home grew thin, brittle. Every shared meal felt like a performance. Every touch felt like a lie. I was drowning in silence, in the unspoken knowledge that hung between us like a thick fog. I tried to talk. I remember trying to talk. John, I started one evening, the word fragile, breaking the quiet. He looked up, his eyes guarded. Is everything okay? The question hung there, heavy and inadequate. He shrugged, didn't meet my gaze.
Fine.
Just tired. The universal excuse. It shut the door, locked it tight. I didn't push. Fear held me back. Fear of what I would find if I pushed. Fear of destroying the fragile illusion we were still maintaining. Fear of facing the truth. But the truth has a way of finding you, even when you're hiding from it. It came in the form of a whispered word at a company dinner. A careless glance. The way Isabella, a new architect we'd hired 6 months prior, seemed to vibrate with a secret energy whenever John was near. The lingering looks. The casual, almost possessive way she touched his arm when she thought no one was looking. My blood ran cold. Isabella.
Young.
Beautiful. Ambitious. Everything I wasn't, or felt I wasn't anymore. The pieces clicked into place with a sickening finality. The late nights, the secrecy, the change in him. It wasn't stress. It wasn't a season. It was her. The realization hit me like a physical blow. It wasn't just an affair. It was happening inside the company we built together. It was a betrayal that intertwined the personal and the professional, poisoning the well from which we both drank. I felt a strange, detached calm settle over me after the initial shock. The sandbags were gone. The tide was in. There was nothing left to protect. Just the wreckage. And a growing, icy resolve. The first few weeks were a blur of pain and numbness. I went through the motions of work, of life, a ghost haunting my own home. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. My sister, Sarah, noticed. She'd call, her voice full of gentle concern. You okay, sis? You sound distant. I'd brush it off, another lie added to the pile. I couldn't tell her. Not yet. The shame was a heavy cloak. And telling her meant making it real, making it a public pain shared with the person I loved most. I started digging. Quietly. Methodically. My background in finance and logistics, the skills I'd honed keeping our business afloat, served me well. I accessed company accounts. I checked his credit card statements. I tracked his movements. It was clinical, detached. The woman doing this wasn't me. She was cold, efficient, driven by something raw and primal. The evidence piled up. Dinners, weekend trips disguised as business trips, gifts. So many gifts. He was spending lavishly on her, using money from the company accounts, money we earned, money I managed. It wasn't just emotional betrayal, it was financial and professional theft. He was stealing from me in every conceivable way. The coldness deepened, hardening into something sharp. The idea sparked in the darkness, a tiny, vengeful ember. Sarah's wedding. It was 6 months away, scheduled to be held at the Grand Oak Manor, a beautiful, historic venue just outside of town. A place Sarah had dreamed of since she was a little girl. A place that held special significance for our family. He knew how important it was. He knew how much Sarah cherished the location. And he was planning to bring Isabella there. To my sister's wedding. To flaunt their affair on a day meant for family, for love, for celebration. The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. It was a deliberate act of cruelty, designed to wound me in the most public, most painful way imaginable. And in that moment, the ember became a flame. I wouldn't just survive this. I wouldn't just leave. I would make him understand the magnitude of his betrayal. I would hit him where it hurt most. His ego. His public image. His sense of control. My focus shifted. The pain was still there, a dull ache beneath the surface, but it was now channeled into something else. Strategy. Revenge. Not petty revenge. Something significant. Something that would strip away his arrogance and leave him exposed. I started researching the Grand Oak Manor. Who owned it? What was its financial situation? Was it vulnerable? I used my contacts, the network I'd built over years of managing contracts and dealing with suppliers. I asked discreet questions, veiled as potential business opportunities. Information trickled back. The manor was privately owned by a family. They were getting older. There had been rumors of financial difficulties, of the place not turning the profit it used to. It was a long shot, a crazy idea, but it lodged in my mind and wouldn't let go. I spent weeks buried in feasibility studies. How much would it cost? Where would I get the money? Our shared business assets were tied up with John, and I knew he would fight me tooth and nail if I tried to access them now, especially if he suspected what I was planning. I needed independent capital. My own money. Money he didn't know about. Over the years, I had quietly squirreled away a portion of my salary, investments he didn't pay attention to, a separate account for emergencies, or just independence. It wasn't enough. Not even close. The problem seemed insurmountable. Buying a historic estate and wedding venue required millions. I had hundreds of thousands. It felt like staring up at a sheer cliff face. Doubt crept in. Maybe this was insane. Maybe I should just take my evidence, file for divorce, and walk away, licking my wounds in private. That was the sensible thing to do. But every time I pictured him at that wedding, with her, smiling that smile, the sensible option evaporated. The anger was a furnace, fueling an almost reckless determination. I wouldn't walk away. I would conquer. I started reaching out. Not to banks. They'd require collateral I couldn't easily access without John knowing. I looked for private investors. People I knew, people I'd done business with over the years, who trusted me, who knew my financial acumen.
It was risky.
I had to be vague about the specifics, hinting at a lucrative real estate opportunity, a chance to acquire a distressed asset with significant potential. I couldn't tell them the real reason. The personal drama would scare them off. I had to sell them on the numbers, the location, the potential return on investment. It felt like walking a tightrope over a chasm. One wrong word, one slip, and it would all come crashing down. My reputation. My chance at justice. Everything. The meetings were tense. I pitched spreadsheets, projections, market analysis. My voice was calm, steady, professional. Inside, my stomach was a knot of nerves. I was asking people to gamble significant amounts of money based on my word, on my vision, on a secret plan fueled by rage and heartbreak. There were rejections, polite refusals, investors who wanted more details than I could give. My hopes would rise and fall with each phone call, each meeting. It was exhausting living this double life. The meticulous businesswoman by day, the heartbroken, vengeful wife by night. I was running on fumes and pure adrenaline. Then, a breakthrough. Mr. Henderson, a retired developer I'd helped navigate some complex zoning issues years ago. He was known for being shrewd, a calculated risk-taker. He listened patiently, his eyes sharp and assessing. When I finished, there was a long silence. My heart hammered against my ribs. Finally, he spoke. The manor, you say? Heard it was in trouble. Interesting property. He didn't ask about the specifics of my funding structure or my partners, of which I had none yet. He asked about my plan for the place. My vision. I talked about restoring its historical charm, expanding its capacity, marketing it differently. I talked about the details, the logistics, the financials, the things I knew cold. He leaned back, a slow smile spreading across his face. All right, he said. I'm in. On one condition. You run the show. Every last detail. You've got a good head for this, kid. Let's make some money. It wasn't about justice or revenge for him. It was business. Pure and simple. But his confidence was a lifeline. With his commitment, I could attract others. The process accelerated, but it was fraught with complications. The manor's ownership structure was more complex than anticipated, involving multiple family members, each with their own demands and squabbles. There were environmental surveys, structural reports, permits to navigate. It was a bureaucratic nightmare. Every day brought a new hurdle, a new potential deal-breaker. The sellers were difficult, emotional about letting go of their family legacy, yet desperate for the money. Negotiations stretched on, tense and frustrating. There were moments I felt utterly defeated, sitting alone in my office late at night, staring at spreadsheets that refused to balance, at legal documents filled with jargon that seemed designed to confuse. The wedding date loomed, a constant, terrifying deadline. Could I actually pull this off in time? Meanwhile, John seemed oblivious, lost in his own world with Isabella. He was distracted, making careless mistakes at work that I quietly fixed, covering his tracks out of habit, or maybe just to keep the business stable long enough for my plan to mature. He occasionally complained about my secretiveness, my distance, the irony lost on him. He had no idea the scale of what was happening right under his nose. He saw a wife withdrawing, not a strategist dismantling his world piece by piece. His arrogance was my shield. He couldn't imagine me capable of such a thing. Then came the deepest crisis. Just weeks before the wedding, a competing offer emerged for the manor. A large hotel chain wanted to turn it into a boutique resort. Their offer was higher. The sellers were wavering. My group of investors, carefully assembled, started getting nervous. Mr. Henderson called me, his voice tight. "They're serious. We need to match it or walk."
Can you swing it?
My blood ran cold. Matching it meant finding millions more, money that simply wasn't there. The delicate financial house of cards I'd built was on the verge of collapse. All that work, all that secrecy, all that pain for nothing? I felt the familiar numbness creep back in, colder this time, laced with despair. I stood to lose everything, not just John, but my financial stability, my reputation with these investors, maybe even parts of the business if John found out how I'd been using my time and resources. The cliff face wasn't just steep, it was crumbling beneath my feet. I didn't sleep for 3 days. I pored over the contracts, the financial models, searching for an angle, any angle. I talked to my lawyer, sworn to secrecy, brainstorming possibilities. We were out of options. The competing offer was simply better. The deadline was days away. The wedding invitations were already sent, listing the Grand Oak Manor as the venue. Sarah was buzzing with excitement, sending me photos of flower arrangements and cake samples, completely unaware of the war being waged around her chosen location. How could I tell her? How could I let her down? The weight of it was crushing. Sitting at my desk, the early morning light filtering through the blinds, hitting a stack of old company files, something caught my eye. Minutes from a board meeting years ago. We were discussing expansion, potential acquisitions, and the Grand Oak Manor had come up. Not as a venue, but as a potential property for development. John had done some initial research. He'd commissioned a detailed report on the property, its history, its value, its vulnerabilities. He dismissed it as too complicated at the time, the family ownership too messy. But he had the report. A comprehensive, expensive report. And it wasn't listed as an asset on the company books. He'd likely expensed it under consulting fees and buried it. He was always doing things like that, small, shady maneuvers he thought no one noticed. A spark ignited, not of hope, but of cold, hard calculation. The report. It contained detailed assessments, financial projections, legal histories, even information about the family's internal dynamics, information I had paid dearly for in my own research. It was a treasure trove. And it was ours. Joint company property, even if he'd hidden it. I made a decision. A dangerous one. I wouldn't try to match the competing offer. I couldn't. Instead, I would play a different game. I called the seller's lawyer. I didn't mention the competing offer. I didn't beg for more time. I brought up the historical value of the property, the challenges of its unique structure, the potential for unforeseen restoration costs. And then I mentioned casually that I had come across a rather detailed, previously unknown historical and structural assessment of the manor, commissioned some years ago. I hinted that this assessment might contain information relevant to its condition and future use, information that might impact its valuation or reveal complexities the current buyers hadn't accounted for. It was a bluff, a calculated risk. I didn't give them the report. I just let them know it existed, and that I had it. The air hung heavy with unspoken accusations, with the weight of their discomfort. The sellers knew their family secrets, their hidden issues. They knew a comprehensive, independent report could expose problems they hadn't disclosed, potentially tanking the competing, clean offer or leading to protracted legal battles. My lawyer called it introducing uncertainty. I called it leveraging his own hidden sins against him. It wasn't about the extra money anymore. It was about removing their incentive to take the other offer by making it too risky, too complicated. It worked. The sellers, spooked by the potential complications and delays my hinted-at report could cause with the large hotel chain, suddenly became much more amenable to my original, slightly lower offer. They wanted a clean, quick exit. My offer, suddenly, seemed like the safer bet. The final negotiations were a frantic blur. Lawyers, bankers, investors. Paperwork flying. The clock ticking down to the wedding day. There were last-minute hitches, documents misplaced, signatures delayed. I barely slept, living on coffee and adrenaline. My entire being was focused on this one goal. Nothing else mattered. Not the pain, not the betrayal, not the fear. Only the finish line. 2 days before the wedding, the contracts were signed. The wire transfers went through. The Grand Oak Manor was mine.
Ours.
Mine and the investors. I had done it. Against all odds, against logic, against the man who had tried to erase me. I owned the venue. Sarah's wedding venue. His wedding venue. The secret was immense, a physical weight in my chest. I couldn't tell Sarah. Not until the right moment. Not until he was there, with her, in the place he thought he owned, in the place where he planned to publicly humiliate me. The anticipation was a potent, intoxicating mix of triumph and dread. What would happen when he found out? The thought sent a shiver down my spine, part fear, part exhilaration. The wedding day arrived in a burst of sunshine and nervous energy. The air at the Grand Oak Manor smelled of cut grass and roses. Sarah was radiant, her face glowing with happiness. Helping her into her dress, adjusting her veil, laughing with the bridesmaids, it felt surreal. Like I was playing a part in a beautiful dream, while harboring a dark, explosive secret. I kept my focus on her joy, letting it anchor me. This day was for her. The rest was necessary cleanup. Guests started arriving, a cheerful stream of friends and family. I saw people I hadn't seen in years. I smiled, I hugged, I made small talk. My heart felt like a drum machine, a frantic beat beneath my calm exterior. And then I saw him, walking through the entrance, his arm linked with Isabella's. They looked perfect, a handsome couple, dressed for a wedding. My wedding. He scanned the crowd, a proprietorial air about him, as if this grand place belonged to him. His eyes met mine for a fleeting second. There was a flicker of something I couldn't read. Surprise? Annoyance? He didn't acknowledge me, just turned his head back to Isabella, whispering something that made her laugh, a light, tinkling sound that grated on my nerves. They moved through the reception space, greeting people. He introduced Isabella with casual confidence. This is Isabella, a colleague from work, colleague. The lie hung in the air, thin and translucent to anyone who looked closely, but most people just smiled and nodded. Family friends gave me sympathetic glances, unsure if I knew, unsure what to say. I held myself straight, a polite, fixed smile on my face. My armor was holding.
Barely.
The ceremony was beautiful. Sarah's vows, her tear-filled eyes, the love radiating from her and her new husband. I stood there, a witness to pure, uncomplicated joy, while my own life felt like a twisted mess. But even through the haze of my own turmoil, I felt a fierce protectiveness towards Sarah, towards this day. He wouldn't ruin this for her. Not completely. The reception began. The music started. The champagne flowed. People ate, they danced. John and Isabella were at a table across the room, laughing, sharing intimate jokes. He looked completely at ease, the picture of a man who had everything. He had no idea the ground beneath his feet was about to disappear. The moment I had planned, rehearsed, and dreaded arrived. The wedding planner, a lovely, energetic woman named Maria, took the microphone to make some announcements. Thanking the guests, introducing the wedding party, outlining the evening's schedule. I stood near the edge of the dance floor, my hands clasped tightly in front of me, a knot of anticipation tightening in my stomach. My gaze was fixed on John. He was looking at Isabella, a smug expression on his face. Maria finished thanking the vendors and began her final remarks. And finally, she announced, her voice ringing out through the loudspeakers, we'd like to give a special thank you to the owners of this magnificent venue, the Grand Oak Manor, for hosting us tonight and for their incredible hospitality. As many of you know, the manor has recently changed hands, and the new ownership has done a tremendous job preparing for tonight's celebration. Please join me in welcoming and thanking the new owner. My name. The sound system seemed to amplify the sudden silence that fell over the room. It was instantaneous. Every head turned. Every eye was on me. And on John. His face went utterly, completely blank. The smug smile vanished, replaced by a look of stunned disbelief. His jaw dropped. Isabella, beside him, froze, her champagne glass halfway to her lips. People started murmuring, a confused ripple spreading through the crowd. My name. I own the venue? Sarah gasped, her eyes wide, darting between me and John. Then, John's face contorted. Disbelief curdled into anger. A deep, furious red crept up his neck. He shot out of his chair, knocking it over with a crash that echoed in the sudden quiet. What? He roared, his voice booming across the room, raw with shock and fury. That's not possible. What are you talking about? All eyes were now fixed on him, on his public outburst. The carefully constructed facade of the composed businessman, the happy wedding guest, shattered into a million pieces. He looked wild, exposed. Isabella was trying to pull him back down, whispering urgently, but he was oblivious. He was staring at me, his eyes blazing with a mixture of shock and something akin to fear. I walked slowly towards the microphone, the silk of my dress whispering around my ankles. Every step felt deliberate, powerful. I reached Maria, who looked visibly shaken by John's outburst. I took the microphone from her hand, my grip steady. I looked out at the sea of faces, the shocked expressions, the dawning understanding on some. And then I looked directly at John. He stood frozen, his chest heaving, his perfect suit somehow looking disheveled. Yes, John, I said, my voice clear and calm, amplified throughout the hall. It is possible. As of last week, I, along with a group of investors, finalized the purchase of the Grand Oak Manor. I paused, letting the words sink in. He looked like he'd been punched. His face was pale now, except for the furious flush on his cheeks. You see, I continued, my tone still measured, polite, but with an edge of steel, I've always had a knack for finding overlooked opportunities. And when I discovered this beautiful place was potentially available, well, I couldn't resist. The double meaning hung in the air. Overlooked opportunities. Isabella. The venue. He understood. The realization hit him like a physical wave. He hadn't just been caught. He had been strategically, meticulously outmaneuvered. On his mistress's arm. At my sister's wedding. In the venue I now owned. His grand gesture of public defiance had just landed him in the center of his own public humiliation. He took a step towards me, his hand reaching out as if to grab the microphone. You can't. You bitch. How did you? He sputtered, his voice thick with rage and disbelief. Isabella finally managed to grab his arm, pulling him back, hissing something in his ear, her own face a mask of horror. I smiled then, a slow, genuine smile that didn't reach my eyes.
How?
Let's just say I used the skills I honed managing our business, John. The ones you apparently took for granted. I gestured around the room, the beautiful hall filled with shocked faces. This place is magnificent, isn't it? So much history. So many stories. I looked at Isabella. And now it has a new chapter. A new legacy. He lunged forward again, shaking off Isabella's hand. This time, security, discreetly positioned nearby, stepped in, two large men calmly but firmly intercepting him. He struggled against them, yelling, his face a grotesque mask of fury and impotence. You're crazy. You're insane. I'll sue you. I'll ruin you. His words were slurred, desperate. You'll try, I'm sure, I said, my voice still calm, cutting through his rage. But unlike you, John, I've always kept meticulous records. Paper trails. They tend to be more powerful than empty threats. I looked away from him then, addressing the stunned guests. Please, everyone, I said, my tone softening, a practiced smile returning. Don't let this minor unpleasantness spoil the celebration. This is Sarah's day. Let's focus on the happy couple. And with that, I handed the microphone back to Maria and stepped away, merging back into the crowd. John was still struggling with security, being escorted, or rather, dragged, towards a side exit, yelling incoherently about lawyers and revenge. Isabella followed, her champagne dress a streak of pale shame, not daring to look back. The room was buzzing, 1,000 whispered conversations erupting at once. Sarah was looking at me, tears streaming down her face, a confused mix of shock, understanding, and maybe pride. The immediate aftermath was a strange mix of chaos and forced normality. John and Isabella were gone, ejected from the premises, their dramatic exit the topic of stunned conversation. The wedding planner, a consummate professional, quickly got things back on track. The music resumed, tentatively at first, then louder. People started dancing again, talking in hushed tones, glancing at me with curiosity and awe. Sarah found me by the cake table, her eyes red but her smile shaky. She threw her arms around me, hugging me tight. You own it? This place? You did that? She whispered, pulling back to look at me. I just nodded, holding her gaze. But
Why? How?
I couldn't explain it all, not here, not now. Later, I murmured. Everything. Later, she nodded, understanding in her eyes. She knew.
She knew about John.
She knew how he'd hurt me. And she saw, perhaps, that this wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming something, about standing up. The rest of the night was a blur. I played the part of the supportive sister, the gracious host. I danced, I laughed, I congratulated Sarah and her husband. But beneath the surface, I was raw, exposed. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a vast emptiness. The victory was sweet, yes, intensely so, a rush of vindication unlike anything I'd ever experienced. But it was also laced with sorrow. The destruction was complete. My marriage, the life I had built, was over, ended not with quiet dignity, but with a public explosion of my husband's making. Owning the Grand Oak Manor. It was more than just a property acquisition. It was a monument to my resilience, a symbol of my refusal to be a victim. The months of secret work, the financial risks, the emotional toll, it had all led to this one shattering moment. The price had been immense. I had lost my husband, yes, but I had already lost him long before. What I had gained was something else. My power. My agency. A profound understanding of my own strength. Walking through the empty reception hall the next morning, the scent of stale champagne and faded flowers in the air, it felt like walking through the ruins of my old life. But this time, I wasn't lost in the wreckage. I was standing in the center of something I had created, something solid and real. The sun streamed through the tall windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the quiet air. It was just a building, yes, but it represented a turning point. The place where my humiliation was supposed to be complete became the stage for my unexpected triumph. What comes next? The business with John will be messy. Lawsuits, asset division, the ugly details of divorce. But I am ready. I have the paper trails. I have the knowledge. And I have a newfound steely resolve. The Grand Oak Manor needs work, needs management, needs love. It's a new challenge, a new focus. A place to pour my energy, my skills, my vision. A place to build something new, something entirely mine. The victory wasn't just about him screaming. It was about finding my voice in the silence, about turning heartbreak into leverage, about building a fortress from the rubble. It wasn't the life I had planned. It was harder, colder, more solitary in some ways. But it was also, in a strange, fierce way, more authentically mine. The pain hadn't disappeared, but it was no longer consuming me. It was a scar, a reminder of the battle fought and won. I stood in the silent hall, the morning sun warm on my face, and took a deep breath. The air was clean. The future was uncertain, but it was finally, completely my own. If this story hit close to home, I'd love to hear your version in the comments. Thanks for being here. Subscribing helps bring more of these to life.